All right, I'm really excited to welcome Mokshith Voodarla, co-founder and CEO of Sieve, where he's leading the charge in building video AI tools for developers. Mokshith has a really cool background, having worked in AI and machine learning at companies like Scale, Ford Motor Company, and NVIDIA. He's also a graduate of UC Berkeley's College of Engineering. And I think just as important to share beyond his professional achievements, which are many, he's also a fan of orange chicken, tres leches cake, and the Boston Celtics. So I'm really thrilled to have him today with us to share his insights, hopefully on Bill Russell, LeBron James, versus whoever his favorite team is, and also talk about AI and innovation. So welcome, Mokshith.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Well, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about as AI becomes more and more at the forefront is like what the future of it looks like in the context of the world. So like I grew up watching Superman cartoons with Brainiac and then Data from Star Trek.
Mhm.
One of my favorite movies is Her with, there's David and Prometheus. Like what's your kind of world look like? Is it like robots? Is it people being supplemented? How do you see it?
I don't know. I mean, I think all of those things are cool. Robots and augmented AI systems that you can plug into and ask questions to whenever you want. But I don't know. One of the things I'm super interested in and excited about is just kind of new ways to experience fun things. What I mean by that is kind of like, what does it feel like to travel to a new place that you've never been immediately, kind of virtually, but kind of really feel like you're there. And what does it look like to get models to maybe imagine those places for you in this like very, very realistic way, or just new forms of entertainment, things like that are just much more immersive that I think like I don't know, some new generative models and things like that could unlock. I think those are super interesting ideas to explore with. But obviously robots are cool. Someone that could do my dishes and clean my room, that's great. But yeah, I'm more interested in some of like just the cooler experiences like humans can have on top of the productivity gains.
Okay, so I don't know if you've read the book or seen the movie Ready Player One, but
I
like
have.
okay, so like the idea of going into the world you grew up in the past, like seeing what your high school was like from afar.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder, like, back in the 90s or the 80s, like, you know, um, what did it feel like, the excitement of calling up all your friends to go hang out? And did that make hanging out more special than today when you just kind of text and you meet up whenever? I don't know. That's something I've always wondered.
Oh well, I mean, I could tell you it was exciting, but also like if your friend didn't answer because he was outside and he missed the call, it was like your night was ruined. So it's a really interesting one.
I see.
So tell me a little bit about Steve. You guys are past YC. Did
Yeah.
you apply going in knowing what you wanted to do, or did you show up with
Yeah.
like a kind of general idea and change it?
Yeah. So, my co-founder and I, we started the company straight out of school actually, and we were interested in a set of ideas when we kind of applied. Actually, like the idea we were most interested in was this kind of concept of how do you kind of test and evaluate computer vision models better? So the idea is like, hey, if you're a self-driving car company, I don't know, how well does your model perform when it's raining versus sunny versus windy versus with a lot of glare? And we felt like, I mean, with some of the jobs that we've done at different places, we felt like most people didn't really kind of care about evals enough. Um, and so that was the initial problem we were exploring. We got into YC with that idea. We explored that idea for like probably half of the batch, and then kind of realized, you know, a lot of these tools that ML engineers need, there were like 20 other problems they were trying to solve, and this one problem kind of solved in its own way was not necessarily the right way to kind of go approach engineers and companies versus, I don't know, bigger ecosystem, maybe some open source tool or whatever it was. And so at some point, maybe during the batch, people were telling us about video. And the idea we had was around kind of, hey, people have large video data sets. This seems like an even harder problem than just, typical image data sets, whatever. How do you help people maybe find the most interesting moments in their data set to go train their models? And I mean, even that problem didn't exactly stick, but at some point, I think the thing that clicked to us was like, hey, we've been so obsessed with how do we help machine learning engineers? What if instead we start thinking about the problems regular software engineers face when they try to go do stuff with machine learning? And kind of that switch of persona is probably what I would say kind of kickstarted towards what we do today, kind of more focused on developers broadly, not just machine learning practitioners, and a focus on video. And so that was kind of the story. I mean, my co-founder and I, we got into a lot of the stuff doing robotics in high school. Um, and I mean, yeah, kind of got into computer vision that way and then got into tooling and things like that. So
So like, were you guys? I'm trying to remember what the program is called. I lived in New Hampshire, and like high
yeah.
schools near there, they had those programs where you could like create bots that would try to kill each other. Were you into
So
that kind of stuff, or
it wasn't killing each other, but it was FIRST Robotics.
okay?
And FIRST Robotics, their whole motto is the complete opposite. It's like this thing about gracious professionalism is their term that they have. And I don't know, different games they have every year. And there was always like some sort of a small computer vision component for the games. Like anything from, hey, like, get the robot to like detect this green piece of tape that's somewhere on the field and like drive towards it and place it like a gear on it or something like that. And so small tasks like that. Abhi, my co-founder, is probably like he's actually the first one who even taught me how to use OpenCV, which is like this popular kind of open like just computer vision library, which is what we use for like a lot of these very simple tasks like tracking red balls, green pieces of tape, things like that.
Ah, super cool.
Yeah,
When you guys started transitioning to like thinking about software engineers versus ML
yeah.
engineers, were there like specific, immediate, obvious challenges where you said, okay, we have our ICP, our persona kind of
Yeah.
nailed. What's the first thing we want to do? Like, what's the first
Yeah.
feature, product, whatever?
I mean, honestly, it wasn't super well thought out when we were just trying things. I think like um the first thing we did, honestly, was just we put up a landing page and advertised a lot of different like video object detection use cases. So everything from like the like videos of like pet tracking to like tracking like angles in like a baseball game. Like there were like 15 different use cases I think we just like thought of and put up. And then it was like you could click, you could book a demo with us basically. And then when you got on the call and you told us what you wanted to do, we'd be like, okay, cool, and we'd get back to you in a couple of days with basically the pipeline built for what you wanted to do, hosted on our infrastructure, and it was kind of this like it was like consulting plus infrastructure in a way for a while. And I think the things we sort of learned there, we were just trying to understand, like, why are these people even coming to us? Because we did get customers this way and like we solved some problems. And it was like, the infrastructure is hard, but it's not as hard as like kind of this R&D step that I think you have to kind of do with a lot of models where, a lot of people would come to us with ideas where they're like, hey, there's this cool model that does this thing. Like, I want to use it. Can I try using it? And then when we gave them access to the model to use, they're like, oh, like it doesn't work in this case or this case. And it's like, it felt like we were guiding them through this like R&D process. And so it was like, how do you make R&D easier for engineers, especially when there's like a lot of different models out there. They all have their kind of own trade-offs. A lot of problems people solve involve multiple models you're putting together in weird ways. So I think like those are the pain points we started like thinking about a lot more, as to what we really wanted to solve, kind of through that process of consulting almost.
Totally makes sense. I think we had an investor early on who would kind of give us a similar suggestion when we were thinking about new products or features. It's like throw up a landing page,
Right.
put some ads towards it. I think that's actually one of these things that like a lot of people don't talk about is just helping people figure out what they want is a big part of it.
Right.
And then you can kind of figure it out iteratively.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like now that you guys have kind of locked in this video
Yeah.
AI for developers,
Hmm.
you've one thing I've noticed where I'm personally in a Slack channel that your company
Yeah.
has, and we're
Yeah.
a customer of yours. And it seems like once a week, maybe more often than that, you've come up with a new model, you're releasing something, there's a new
Yeah.
feature, and it just seems like a kind of almost like a tidal wave of stuff. So I don't know if your team is 1,000 people or how you're doing it, but like
Yeah.
it's changing quickly. And
Sure.
how are you guys think about like managing that whole process, all these different tools, resources?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it like naturally there's like many models that come out every single day, every week. Um, and I think if we were serving like a very generic audience, meaning just we called ourselves like an AI platform for everything, like I think it's really hard to keep up. I think the thing that makes it easier is kind of understanding what use cases our customers are most interested in, and then figuring out the relevant sort of building blocks almost that would enable our customers to build exactly what they're trying to build. And I think that like kind of hones in a lot more as to what we should spend our time even working on, optimizing or like building pipelines around, whatever it is. So I think like just having more focus is super important. And I think like a lot of our use cases are in kind of digital media, video, whether it's social, communication, creation, right? And so there's like this realm of use cases that are most commonly used in our product. And I think like starting there is super important. And so focus is probably the best answer I have there.
What about like internally?
Yeah,
You guys are presumably also using AI to build your business. Like, so
sure.
you've got this like warehouse of AI features and products that other companies are releasing or that you're are
Sure.
being made open source. You're pulling from those. What are you guys doing internally to like be fast, like move, be innovative?
Yeah. I think I mean, a couple of things. One thing that we found generally with any kind of AI feature people build is that, there's always going to be like 10, 20 different use cases. But like the interesting pattern you notice when you kind of focus on some niche is that there's a lot of components that are super reusable across different use cases. And what I mean by that is like, I don't know, one example I could give you that's super tangible here is like dubbing, which is like this pipeline that's on Sieve where you can translate videos into different languages. A component of that involves, tracking who's speaking and then also applying lip syncing to kind of make it look like they spoke the other language. The interesting thing is that that same thing to track who's speaking can also be used for other pipelines that are kind of focused more on content repurposing and reformatting. So the idea of like, hey, I have a podcast recorded in a landscape kind of camera. Can I just focus and auto edit the videos to focus on who's actively speaking, which is very useful in like, podcast, long form kind of content. And so I think like there's a lot of efficiency gains that can be made if you really treat problems as, hey, like, what are the reusable pieces that maybe are applicable to other problems that can go be solved as well? And so we find ourselves kind of reusing stuff, which I think is like one of the big things that allows us to move more quickly. And I think it's also like kind of something we've tried to bake in to the product experience we're building. And so all these things that we make available out of the box use the same kind of product experience that our customers can also use to build custom applications in the product as well. So I think that philosophy is super important.
Very cool. I was just thinking about the dubbing example.
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and I think one of our engineers had made like 10 different videos of a welcome to Zeit
Oh, okay.
intro video. And he had like
Yeah.
put it into like Polish, Spanish, and like I was showing it to my kids.
Yeah.
They just thought it was such a like a delightful, fun experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Super cool. What about things that like you're hopeful to see Like where you're kind of maybe you're not going to develop
Yeah.
it, but you're waiting for it. Are there things where you're
Mm,
kind of excited to see that haven't yet come to fruition?
I think, I mean, one trend I want to see kind of across the board is just everything we already have just faster and cheaper. I think there's just a lot of, I mean, text to speech is a great example of this, where there are great text to speech models that can sound like me, that, run quickly, but they cost too much today, for example. What would it feel like for, I don't know, being able to apply text to speech dubbing to every video on the internet? How can you get kind of costs so low that, you can enable those sorts of things? Or, I don't know, even like, classifying a large library of videos and actually looking at every single frame to kind of have some granular search. Right now, like, I mean, people sample frames, people might like have weird tricks to kind of reduce cost, but I don't know. I think like just generally the trend of faster, cheaper, but everything we have today, is one thing I'm excited about. Another kind of pattern I'm excited about is just like models that let you control kind of outputs a bit more easily. What I mean by that is like, I mean, again, the example of text to speech is like, it's one thing to clone your voice and have the AI speak like you. It's another thing to, maybe be able to control the specific accent or the specific emotion or things like that really easily, right? Um, and so I think just generally like, and you see this even with like some of the new text to image models. Like I think there's this new model that came out called like Flux, which I think is integrated into Twitter now through Grok. And that like generates these like very realistic looking images. But I think there could be a lot more work done around like control as to like, hey, I'm explaining to the model this exact thing. Like, how well can you follow my instructions? So I think control and then just speed and cost across the board are things I'm excited about.
Yeah, I would have to agree, especially with speed or
Yeah.
even like connectivity. I've noticed, for example, that outside of the workday, like particularly when I use OpenAI,
Yeah.
ChatGPT at like 5, 6 p.m. with my kids, they'll say,
I
"Hey,
see.
Dad, what's the fastest land animal?" We start talking, and it's like, "Sorry, can't connect."
I
I
see.
think there's still sort of like
Yeah.
infrastructure pain, all these sort of little things.
Right.
Um, so you guys kind of went from, all right, we're going to go out there and figure out some cool
Yeah.
API video products. You've got
Hmm.
customers now. What are some of your like, I don't know, like when you look at or talk to some of your customers and you see what they're doing, what are some of the
Yeah.
examples where you're like, whoa, this is like, I can't believe they did this, or this is totally different than what I expected us to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. One of our customers that we work with that I think is super interesting is a company that they do a bunch of video gen stuff, but they're very focused on the music industry, and creating really nice visuals for like music artists. Um, and the interesting thing there is like it's not necessarily even about making these like effects and cool patterns look real. It's about making them like react to the audio and like change and warp. And I think some of their work, I mean, they have like a consumer product that anyone can use to kind of generate these visuals, but they also kind of have the studio component of their product that big artists go use and I think create visuals for like their Coachella sets and things like that. And that's super cool to see because it's like, wow, like I didn't think any of any of the stuff we help people build would go play at like Coachella. I've never been. And so that's one interesting thing.
Have you thought about asking them to pay you in Coachella tickets, perhaps?
I mean, I have not, but I should.
That's a great use case. Any others that you think are super cool?
Um, I think, I mean, like, I think the obvious ones are like, I mean, dubbing is obviously super interesting, right? Just because, like, I mean, it is reducing sort of language barriers across the board, and I think like there's great use cases that we serve in education and content creation broadly, that I think are really cool. Another one that I think is like pretty fun is we recently released a really optimized version of SAM2, which is this like video segmentation model, that you can give it a point, and then it'll track that point, or object across a video super, super accurately. And there's some super interesting like sports tracking use cases, I think, where we even kind of gave it points of like a ball, and it even when the ball goes behind a person in like this soccer game and things like that, it still tracks it super, super well, and the ball is like this really tiny thing on the screen. And so I think like some of the sports stuff is cool. I'm a basketball fan, and so I think some of the sports use cases are really cool. um yeah, none others off the top of my head. Those are some that stand out.
Those sound awesome.
Yeah,
Um, One thing we talked about was how you guys have an investor. He was previously CEO of Parse. He's at Matrix now, Aaliyah,
yeah,
and thinking about when I was working with him at
yeah,
Parse, and we were building a developer tool. I think one of the ways that our engineers, developer team, developer marketing, support, they all
right.
thought about making a great product was actually having incredible documentation.
Mm,
And I think companies like Stripe have done the same thing,
yeah,
where like people look to them. How do you guys feel like
yeah,
you you attempt to or try to kind of stand out in
yeah,
presumably a competitive space? Is
yeah,
it documentation? Is it features? Is it being ahead, innovating?
yeah. I mean, I think this is something that like we've learned the hard way over time, where like developers have a very, very high kind of quality bar when it comes to products that they use. And they like can get very suspect about, the smallest things that they may not have control about, control over, in, whatever tooling that they're using. I think like I don't know, just like a general kind of philosophy that I mean, I was talking to someone last night that they kind of put these words in, where was kind of like, how do you make a developer actually feel like the hero when they use your product, rather than you seeming like the savior? Um,
I see.
right? Because like, and I think this comes from building a product where the onboarding experience and like the things you make available out of the box like are super simple and super easy to get started, but that not necessarily meaning that too much is abstracted away from the developer, where they should still have more kind of control. Even if not everyone wants it, I think they should have the option to kind of dive deeper, understand the internals, of how things work, rather than those kind of being black boxes. And so I think like one of the big differentiators that we think about is like, there's a lot of these like very pure sort of API products out there that focus on very specific use cases. Um, but a lot of the time, the thing that you end up missing sort of using some of these products is that it's just the only part of the developer experience there is, hey, like make an API call, get a response back, that's all. Whereas, we have some of these out of the box apps on Sieve, that are really great hooks and ways we get developers into the platform. But really, like a lot of the philosophy is like developers can understand what's going on under the hood. They could take certain components of these applications to kind of go build their own things. Um, and so it's more of like a tool that you can work with, rather than, hey, like, response in, response out. Um, so I don't know, like those are some of the ideas we kind of think about a lot. And I mean, this is still a work in progress for us. Like
Yeah,
we're
yeah, for
nowhere
sure.
near what I would say is like, a tool that, millions and millions of developers rave about. And we want to get there. And I think like this comes from focusing a lot on product quality, and then kind of these kinds of, I don't know, psychological things as to, how you even put yourself in their shoes, like, and how you would feel using a product like this. So
It's a great answer. I love it. Let me ask you a couple questions about, just kind of wrap up on
sure.
I guess more on just leadership and how you think about being CEO or a leader or founder
Yeah.
within your business. Um, obviously you've got a lot to do. I think we talked about how you've got, some marketing that you're working on right now, and
Yeah.
you're doing all sorts of interesting, really cool things long term and then
Yeah.
short term. How do you figure it out? Or do you just work 24 hours a day? Are you like, how do you make it work? What's your approach to making it work and like finding the things that are most high leverage, most impactful?
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, this is also a thing I would say I've struggled with a lot just because I mean, this is my first job technically, right? And I think um the things I've learned is mostly just that you gotta hire people you trust. And like as long as you are setting kind of direction and really good kind of, being critical about like even the smallest things when you just don't like them, I think people kind of generally understand um what that means for what they're doing. And then like if they're talented, they also have their own opinions. Like, and if they're just better at that specific thing, like you should kind of let them do that thing. That doesn't mean you should like, you know, um, I don't know. Like I think what was it? The Paul Graham had the article this
Founder mode.
right, right? But yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of like yeah, abstracting away the things that like make sense to abstract away just because like, you can't focus on everything, but then still like just doing the things that you're good at. I think for me, it's like I try to set aside some time every couple of weeks to just like be like, man, like what did we even do these last like 3 weeks? Like, was it worth it? Like, is it actually going where I want it to go? I think those kinds of gut checks are super helpful. Um,
Where's your place that I mean, like,
yeah.
you talked a little bit about being a Celtics fan. Like, do you go to Celtics game to kind of like just relax and
No.
let things wash over you? Where do you go? Do you go to the mountains? Like, what's
No,
your,
no, no. I mean, I actually really like, I mean, two places I really like going. So I live in SF and I don't know, like my housemates, one of them actually had this routine where every couple of weeks he'd go like on a Friday or Saturday night to like a very specific wine bar. And he would just read there. The vibes there were very much just like you can read, you could talk to people, whatever it is. And I don't know, that specific place I really like, and I've gone there and just written things in a notebook before, but then I also just really like kind of walking. There's this really nice grass area in the marina that I just really like walking through and just like thinking,
you,
working
you know,
out. I don't know,
working
like,
out's super critical,
yeah,
right? It's like, it
yeah,
seems like such a basic human thing, but like without
yeah,
it, I think you go crazy as a CEO.
yeah, exactly. So,
Um, so like going to back to your point about, sort of diving deep into the
yeah,
business occasionally. When I was at Facebook, most of the VPs that worked for Mark Zuckerberg talked about this
yeah,
Eye of Sauron, where he would sort of like, gaze out into marketing or
mhm,
growth or whatever and go deep and really understand the details. And then,
I see.
okay, he's coming out and he's going back. I think just like you said, it's almost impossible to know everything all at once.
Yeah,
And so it sounds like the approach you have is actually pretty similar across the board for companies where you kind of
yeah,
find an opportunity and go deep on it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, do you have any advice here?
I think like one of my favorite things to do is it's either 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, so like the approach that I take is like we have probably a biweekly company all hands. I
Hmm.
have like a monthly Pirate Metrics SaaS worksheet that I update manually myself. Like it's probably 100 lines of data that I comb through and just sort of see how the company's doing. We have our board meeting. So it's basically just checkpoints of reflection.
Hmm.
And, I know we talked about having a board or whether it's
Yeah,
your board of your two co-founders or like me, we have
yeah,
a couple of our investors having some form of accountability
yeah.
to force you to look at things more
Right.
critically. Super
Yeah.
helpful. And to give you advice to look at your team. Cause like you got to trust your team, but you also need help looking at them.
Right. Right. Makes sense.
Well, one final question. Let's look at the magic ball, the future. So we talked a little bit about the type of world that you see. Maybe it's sort of a Ready Player One-ish, like being able to zoom in and out of the worlds that you'd like to
Yeah.
visit. What else do you see out there? What's exciting? Like even in terms of like technology that is coming soon.
I think, I mean, one of the things that really got me into machine learning broadly was robotics, right? I mean, first robotics was the thing that got me into computer vision, and I think like there's a lot of just cool stuff people are pushing the bounds on with humanoids. I think that's super interesting. Where I mean, a lot of the robotics that's out there in the real world is very much in manufacturing, these like very specialist systems. Um, Something that I mean, the whole kind of goal of humanoids is that, hey, like, you have these specialist systems today, and you have these whole R&D teams that are like building these very specialized systems for specific tasks. With the humanoid, if you actually build, a versatile enough machine, the idea is you could go apply it to any task. And so you don't have to invest R&D into every single new problem. You kind of build the thing once and you can go apply it anywhere. Now, it's hard to say like how far away this stuff is. And I think a lot of the constraints are very much in I don't know, like actuators, motors, and kind of manufacturing them, the costs of that. And there's only a few companies out there that can actually go do that at scale. But I don't know. I just think like the idea of like robots, and humanoid robots is really cool.
I don't know if you saw. I think it was Nat Friedman.
Hmm,
He basically said, I would love to find a way to build a robot that picks up the leaves in my
oh.
backyard quietly in the middle of the night. And
Yeah.
he was like, if anybody wants to do it, I'll give you 50K. And like, it's like 6 months have gone by, and now he's got this tiny little robot that picks up 3 leaves at a time.
Yeah.
And I just think about stuff like that where I really just don't want to do it. Like it's those kinds of things. I'm
Yeah.
excited about the future. I saw a robot the other day that like cleans my walls or does
Yeah.
my dishes. I have
Yeah.
to snowplow my driveway every now and again. It's just
I see.
all this stuff that is fun but brutal.
Yeah. 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 So robotics broadly is interesting. Yeah. I mean, maybe one day I'd love to kind of get back into doing robotics at some point. So
Well,
yeah.
one thing you could potentially do at some point to get away from the grind is go teach kids how to be like what you were and kind of bring
Mm,
the next generation into what you're doing.
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining me today,
Yep.
and I'll see you soon.
Awesome. Cool.